This is The Competitive Edge with Hiten Shah. Welcome to The Competitive Edge. My name is Scott Britton, and I'm here to help you answer a question that we all have. How can I get an edge in my business and life? Each week, we're going to uncover how some of the most successful and inspiring entrepreneurs, entertainers, and thought leaders get an edge so you too can reach your full potential. Thanks for tuning in today. Now let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of The Competitive Edge. Today I want to welcome our guest, Hiten Shah, to the show. Hiten is the founder of Kissmetrics and Crazy Egg, an advisor to startups, and someone who I've enjoyed following for a while now. This chat with Hiten covers a lot of different topics, which makes me really happy because he's a really smart guy that stretches the way that you think. We're going to dive into specific things like starting something and why people don't get started, but also where you should get started if you're looking for business ideas. And even if you already have 20 ideas, how to prioritize and choose one that you might already have a competitive advantage in. We also talk about motivation as an entrepreneur, how to maximize learning every single day, and some of the mindsets he uses to understand everyone from his customers to complete strangers. This was a really interesting conversation, which is why I'm so excited to bring it to you right now. So without further ado, here is Hiten Shah. Hiten, how are you, man?
I'm good. It's Monday morning. Can't complain.
Nice. I like it. We were talking a little bit before the show, but the first time that I found out about Hiten and met him was actually at a lean startup machine. And I remember we were in this group and we had just a ton of different ideas that we were so excited about potentially bringing to the world. And you came in and started doing something that nobody else was doing. And that was asking us some really tough questions to figure out if people actually wanted this business idea that we had. So today, Hiten, I thought we could do the same thing for our audience by talking about some of the ways that you think about things in the context of starting and building businesses.
Sounds good.
Awesome. So I know that there's probably a lot of people out there listening who have ideas and have never actually started something, whether that be a company or even a project. What would you say to these people about the value of just starting something?
Yeah, it's very difficult to start something new. Just because there's so many different ideas, there's a million places you could start, a million things that you might think you need to learn or need to do. And so the value in just starting something, anything, I don't care if it's even starting to write something, is just that spark, that motivation to just do something. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be, the final thing. It doesn't have to be the thing that makes you, rich, if that's what you're going for, and makes you successful. I think there's just a lot of value in thinking about not worrying about anything beyond just starting. And, like, for example, when you're, a lot of us are procrastinators. And so I think it's really easy to figure out all these reasons why you shouldn't get started. But, I don't have enough time, or I have a day job, or this and that. But when you really think about it, and when you really look at all the people that have had any level of success, that they just got started. And that's probably the biggest difference between them and you.
Absolutely. What are some typical myths or limiting beliefs that people that you encounter have that prevent them from actually getting started on a business?
Yeah. I think one limiting belief that I've seen is that people believe they need an idea first. And it's I don't have a good idea. So that's a limiting belief to me. It's just pick something, anything, and get started, because it's going to take a while for you to, take sometimes a few tries in most cases for you to actually figure out something that starts working. And so just the fact of practice of getting started and thinking about kind of, what you can work on. So solutions to that are think about customers you want. Think about problems that you have in the world. There's some limits to that kind of thinking, but those are kind of the ideas to get around this thing of I need an idea. Another one would be the fact that they think they need money. And so a lot of people, and over time, I think this is getting to be less true, but a lot of people do believe that they think they need money first before they can get started. So then they go through this whole process of like raising money and things like that, and trying to learn how to do that, making a pitch deck and all that kind of stuff. These days, it's like if you haven't gotten started, it's very unlikely someone's going to give you money unless you've already had something that you've started and either failed or succeeded before. So there's enough proof that you do start stuff. And also you have to compare that to all the different kinds of things that these investors are seeing, which most of them are pretty far along in the progress from getting started to having a product to potentially even having customers or users. So I think that's another limiting belief, which is like, I need money. And I think a third one has to do with time. I kind of hinted at it earlier, but a lot of people think they don't have the time. And usually the time just means that you have to start smaller. And in fact, most of the time, starting small is probably a better idea anyways, even if you do have a lot of time.
Hiten, is there a particular framework that you use or you help people with when they don't have an idea, or they have 20 different ideas and they don't know which one to choose? You alluded to the idea of picking a customer. Is there kind of a hierarchy of questions that you tell people to ask themselves or when they go through this process?
Yeah, generally, one of the first questions I ask, because most of the people have worked at a job or in the services industry, like a lawyer or somebody, I just actually first start by saying, like, what area or type of customer do you believe you have some advantage at either reaching, like, and this is not just marketing, but just reaching to talk to them, or have a better understanding of just because of your experience, which can be a good and a bad thing. But in general, it's like if you have an understanding of a market or a space, you have a shorter ramp-up time to understanding the terminology and how people think about it, as long as you don't use that as a way to limit yourself on what's possible. Because a lot of times you'll see people that aren't from the industry disrupt an industry just because they thought about it differently. So my questions usually have to do with, what is it that you have depth in, or who is it that you can reach? And usually that leads to a lot of interesting things. Sometimes people just say, but I hate my industry, right? Or I hate being a lawyer. And I generally tend to tell them, well, if you hate it so much, you should try to make it better.
I love that. I love the idea too of just taking advantage of the access that you have to really understand people's problems. And even that could even be early adopters for a particular product if you decide to go after that industry.
Yeah, totally agree.
What types of questions do you ask somebody when you approach an industry that, let's say, you have access to figure out where there's a pain that you might be able to help solve?
Yeah. There's a lot of material online about customer development and, learning from your customer. There's a few other concepts out there, such as jobs to be done. And an online friend of mine named Amy Hoy, she has this concept called she calls it online, like a sales safari, where she goes online and tries to figure out what the pain and needs are. And so I think truth is all those different tactics are meant for different styles, depending on what's your style. So some people prefer online and want to do things on the computer, don't even want to have, pick up the phone and talk to people. And I think actually that's okay, because a lot of people are expressing their opinions online, and you can learn a lot if you know how to sort of, look at the forums and things like that. So I did want to add that. But if you have access to people and you can talk to them, generally, like, the framework I use is I like to get stories out of them. And if I talk to like 10 or 20 people and I get these stories, then I can, for myself, if I've recorded them, written them down, I can find what I call the pattern of pain, which is basically what's that core problem, what's that core pain that you hear in everyone's voice, whether it's about a specific piece of their daily workflow or weekly workflow or workflow trying to do something, or something that they really are frustrated with at their job, or some tool that they hate to use, but they have to use it. That's another good one. So I usually just get these stories and I try to really understand more about the person and their day-to-day job and what they're doing. And that helps me early on pick an area to kind of double down on and focus on, and then do a lot more of these other tactics.
I really like that. And one thing that I think a lot of people don't necessarily talk about as much, that I'm kind of excited to get your opinion on, is this idea of people get really excited about potentially starting something and they start talking to customers, and then things get hard and they decide they don't want to do it anymore. And I'm curious to hear from you how important you think it is for people to be passionate about the mission or to even have a mission. I mean, I'm interested to know beyond like just the pure opportunity that exists there, what other questions people should be asking themselves when it comes to potentially starting a business.
Yeah, I think one of the most important questions is, why are you doing it? So why do you want to start your business? Do you want to, and the easiest answer is, I want to change the world. Okay, I understand that. I mean, that's the easiest answer to the question, and one that people are like, all right, fine. But to me, it's literally really thinking deeply about yourself, or yourselves if you have a few people working on it. Why are you guys starting this? What's your motivation? Like, do you really want to see this industry upside down and make a shift in it because you're frustrated with it and you think you can make it better? Are you just trying to make it so that you don't have to work again, so you don't have to work for anybody else and depend on their income? Are you doing it because you have a special skill set, like you're a certain type of programmer, and you kind of have some expertise that you can deliver to other people? Like, so there's a lot of really, good reasons why people start things, and I think they just forget to ask themselves these questions at first.
What's been the driving motivations for yourself with both Kissmetrics and Crazy Egg?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for me, I mean, again, like, I think a lot of people say that, you have to be passionate about something and things like that. A lot of the time, like, I don't think passion is really why people do things, if that makes any sense. They're just looking for their passion. For me, like, I just want to grow. I want to learn. I want to constantly improve. And I happen to be, all the companies I've started have basically targeted marketers and or people trying to improve their conversion rate on the internet. Sometimes it's designers. In the case of Crazy Egg, it's marketers and designers. So it sort of accidentally fell into that based on the first company I started, which is a consulting company doing marketing consultancy or marketing consulting work, services stuff for other companies, primarily online companies. So in my experience, I just sort of happened to land on it. My co-founder had a customer who was paying like $3,500 a month for SEO, and it looked like we could turn that into a business. He was barely out of high school, so he needed all the help he can get. I was barely out of college, and I didn't really have anything that I really fell into doing, except I didn't want to go work for anybody.
I love this idea of kind of optimizing for learning that you talk about. And it seems like for you, really the driving motivation has just always been growth. Is there, I love that, but it seems like at times, like when the going gets tough, it can be hard to keep that on the top of your mind and to just think about like, my mission is just to get better and just to learn. Is there things that you've internalized or you tell yourself every single day or even frequently when you think about like why you're doing what you're doing, if it's just for growth?
Yeah, I think one of the most powerful things in the world is the fact that you can do whatever you want to do. Like, it's not even whatever you put your mind to. You can literally do whatever you want to do in today's world. Like, there's less restrictions than ever around you. There's more rules being broken by companies, by individuals, by even large businesses than ever before. And so, to me, I think it's couple that with this other idea. It's this idea that, like, if you ever look in hindsight and you start thinking about when did I learn the most, you start realizing that you probably learned the most when you made, at least this has been my experience, when in hindsight you should have made a different decision. So that's one time when I've learned the most. Another time when you've learned the most is when you've struggled the most. And sometimes it's because of a bad decision, or sometimes it's just, like the saying goes, life throws you lemons. What do? You make lemonade, right? I'd say, I mean, there's other answers to this question about lemons and lemonade and stuff. But like, to me, it's like, if you optimize your life, yourself, your world around you for learning, then the people around you are like that too, which means they're growing as fast as they possibly can in terms of their personal growth. And I think today it's like every day is a new challenge. Sometimes every hour is a new challenge. And, this is why you see a lot of people like try to beat their own like sort of scores around like running a mile, right? And things like that, or like climbing the biggest mountain they can when they do rock climbing. Like, to me, it's very much the same thing. But to me, it's like, I can do this every day. As an entrepreneur, I can do it every day. There's no ceiling on me. There's nobody telling me what to do, unless I want them to tell me what to do. I'm in control, and that control enables me to learn and grow as fast as I can. So this whole thing about learning as fast as you can and optimizing for learning is really about answering the question of how do you grow personally as fast as you can. And I think that some of the most fulfilling things, I've seen it in other people too, is when they personally feel like they have grown, in like a month or 2 months or even a year. So it's really just about looking back and thinking about, when did you learn the most? When did you grow the most? And you'll see that usually has to do in the times in your life when things are the worst, because you had no choice. And that's kind of what it boils down to.
I love that. Is there any other things that you've done to increase the rate at which you've learned?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is I'm trying to optimize every day around being able to deliberately know what I learned from every interaction I have. And so sometimes it's like, I read some blog post recently that was actually pretty good. I don't really do this, but it's a really good tactic, which is like, after every meeting or every interaction, conversation, for 30 seconds, just write down what you learned, or write down any thoughts you have related to it. And don't think too much about what you write down. And that habit allows you to sort of learn faster and really be more deliberate, ask better questions in your conversations. I think it was a really good tactic. For me, the tactic I personally use is, I think of my brain as a sponge, and I never want to wring it out. I always want to just keep filling it, because I think it's infinite. And then I can sort of use parts of the knowledge I've gained through every interaction, in every other interaction, in every other conversation, which makes it so that no matter what you want to talk about, if it's about business, I can talk about it. I don't care what kind of business it is. I don't care what kind of problem you have. I don't care what kind of department. And the way I've done that is just by meeting as many people as I possibly can that are trying to do things. And usually that tends to be an entrepreneur or people working inside of companies, and just trying to literally just meet with them and try to help them. And that usually tends to help me learn. Like, for example, we met at a lean machine. The lean machine is like a couple-day thing where people learn really fast about how to validate their ideas and come up with better ideas that, and sometimes there's some businesses created out of that. And honestly, in that period of time, there's usually anywhere from 5 to 10 teams that I end up interacting with. I learn a lot. I learn about how they think about things. I learn about what I would consider the hardest piece of starting something new, which is, what's the idea, and is that idea something that actually solves a problem for people? So that's, I guess, how I think about it and some of the practices I've put in place.
That's really cool. And I'm really glad you bring this up, because I think there's just a tendency for us when we're doing things online to kind of think about it like within the funnel, and think about, do a postmortem on maybe an A/B test or some copy changes and try to figure out what we learned. But so rarely do we take this type of intentional postmortem and iteration to the interactions that we have with others, and try to figure out what takeaways we can have to better prepare ourselves for the future. And I just love that this is something that you take to conversations in the real world, because I don't really think a ton of people do that.
Yeah, it's kind of clear based on like the kind of questions a lot of people ask. And I think that over time you just learn that, like, if you want to have meaningful conversations and make an impact in someone's life, even in like 10 minutes, you have to start asking good questions and also not assuming things. So I think another thing I tend to, probably partly my pet peeve, partly just something I think about, is that I don't try to assume I know the answer to a question I'm asking, or I try to make as little assumptions as possible about somebody else without really understanding and knowing kind of what their opinion is or what their answer is.
Is there, how do you avoid that voice in your head that sometimes wants to come up with the answer to a question when you're prospecting potential ideas, when you're trying to maybe get to know somebody for the first time? I think I heard it in a past interview. you called it like an unbiased disposition or something, or curious, like unbiased curiosity.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always been easy to go look at something or somebody and form an opinion without actually having an understanding. And I think the thing that I've noticed is that people tend to have an opinion and make a judgment on somebody without actually understanding the context and understanding like more about the person. So what I tend to do is like, if someone does something that most people think is, let's say, idiotic, I really try to think about, well, what led that person to be that idiotic, right? And why would they do that? And what is lacking in their understanding of the world, I guess, to not understand how their actions, would sort of, or their words or whatever it may be, would sort of affect other people. So I think that's another thing we tend to not do very well, which is we don't really, as on average, understand how when we say something, when we do something, how it impacts other people, how other people feel about it. And I don't just mean other people like one person. I mean like many people, right? That can help you understand how your actions actually impact others. And to me, like that's a lot of what's really, really interesting about kind of the time we live in today, and how there's so many people out there trying to do really awesome things and try to sort of, for lack of a better word, probably the easiest way to explain it is change the world or make an impact, make a dent.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to talk about while we're on this topic is just being a good person as an entrepreneur. And I know that's something that you prioritize and you make an effort to really give back to the community. And I think there's a lot of people that get caught up in, I'm too focused, I'm trying to build my business, and they don't make time for these type of activities. Has this been something that you've always done?
Yeah, I grew up with a father who just was giving and couldn't help himself. So, he just helped others without really thinking about himself. And he constantly did that and still does it to this day. And so I grew up with that around me. And then on top of that, it just felt right. And I think, honestly, as an entrepreneur, I think it's actually one of the hardest things to do. And the reason is there are a lot of situations where it's like, it is you or the other person, right? And, or, you could, depending on your disposition, you could feel bad for doing something that someone else might not feel bad for. And thus you kind of lose a little bit, because as a result of it. And so I think, and a lot of times that has to do with competition, has to do with, issues of like, friends and like, employees from their company, right? And things like that. So I think there's a lot to unpack on trying to be a good human being and be an entrepreneur that's trying to, change things, make things better.
Is there any decision-making frameworks that you use when you're faced with these decisions, or questions that you ask yourself when you encounter a situation that it would be easy not to be a good person?
Yeah, the way I think about it has a lot to do with just like, how am I impacting the world? How am I impacting the other people around me, or the people that are going to be impacted by my decision? And so one of the ways I look at that is, it's one thing to like, I have this sort of way of thinking about it, which is, it's one thing to, what they say is like walk in someone else's shoes. I think when you walk in someone else's shoes, you still have your own brain attached to yourself. So that only allows you to see from their perspective. But when you can find a way to actually think the way they think and walk in their shoes, then you'll have a much, much more crisp and better understanding, at least this has been my experience, of exactly sort of how they think and how they will react to something that you're doing or not doing. This has to do with customers. This has to do with team members in your company. This has to do with any human being, any interaction. Because honestly, there's a lot of interactions. There's a lot of things that kind of you end up having to do as an entrepreneur that you might not want to do, but you just need to do it. And that's what your job is, to do the things nobody else will do, or nobody else is thinking about or wants to think about. And so for me, like, I really try to think about how am I impacting other people, and that's probably the simplest framework I would give you.
Got it. I'm curious about this idea of really thinking the way that somebody else thinks and removing your own brain from the situation. How does one accomplish that?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I think it's practice, just like anything else. So like, I love like being able to meet somebody, have them say a few words, and then be able to predict what their next action is going to be, or be able to, repeat back to them something and be like 90 to 100% accurate. And so I think it's just testing yourself. If you care to do it, test yourself. See if you can do it. And another thing is like, it's pretty easy to, like eavesdrop on a conversation, like in passing, just around you from somebody you don't know. So one thing I like to do, and this is just like, I talked about this a little bit before, but I would just try to hear a conversation that someone's having on the phone in public, and it's sort of eavesdropping, and just be able to predict the next word that the person on our end, the end I can hear, is going to say. Because that would mean that I'm not hearing the other end of it, but I'm pretty good at being able to I get better at understanding kind of what the person on the phone is going to say next. The person that I can hear what they're going to say next. And that means that I have a better understanding, or I have a strong understanding of what's happening in the conversation without hearing the other side.
It's a really cool idea just to kind of try to build this muscle of getting in the proper disposition to understand people. And I like this idea of listening to conversations and trying to predict what is going to happen as a way to exercise that muscle. It's really cool, man. One of the other things I've heard you talk about in previous interviews is this idea of leveraging your time. And I'm curious because as entrepreneurs, as people who, like you said, might not be starting something because they don't have enough time, what are the ways that you think about how you can get the most out of your time to accomplish all the things that you want to?
Yeah, I think that's what I mean by the leverage thing. I think that you brought up. I mean, I've said it in a lot of different frameworks or frames before, but like on a high level, it's simply like, I'm sure that there are a lot of jobs that happen inside of a company that I'm not the best at. Like that's just inevitable. But I pride myself in being able to help other people think better, smarter. I like to tell my team and people I work with, like, when you have a hard problem, the hardest problems come to me, even if you don't think I'll understand it. Because it's likely I'm going to ask you the right questions, or I'm just going to help you think about it. And if nothing else, I'm going to make them less stressed on it so they can find the right solution. That's the truth. And so generally, I think this whole leverage thing that I came up with, and the way I think about it is that, like, you always want to be doing the highest leverage activity if you can. And you don't want to be doing anything that takes up too much time or someone else can do better than you. And so I'm constantly thinking about that. Like, I'm working on something. Can I do it any better? So for example, and I'm not even one to outsource a lot of stuff, if you want to call it that, or I don't even have a virtual assistant. For example, my calendar, guess what? I'm the best one to manage my calendar. Nobody else, unless they know me so well that they're in my head, which is very difficult. Second thing would be like, if I make presentations, like I'm speaking at a conference this weekend, or actually next week, and I make my own presentations. I don't really think that's something I can have someone else do, but I do know other people that do that. Things like that. While, there's better salespeople than me, for example. There's better people that can do paid acquisition and marketing than me. But that being said, I generally try to understand and have a way to understand things faster than most people. So if you go ask me about how are you guys doing paid acquisition for any of my companies, I can give you the whole spiel. And I can tell you exactly how we're doing it. I can even tell you some of the ads that are winning and stuff like that. But you know what? I didn't create any of those ads. I barely even look at the data, but I have a core understanding of how that function in my company works. So I don't know. I mean, I just like to understand things, but at the same time, I hate having to micromanage anybody or anything. And I'd rather make it so that when they're having troubles, they come to me and designing my life, my systems, my ways of communication around that.
Yeah, I guess the challenge that a lot of people face is that although they may be the best person to do a particular task, trying to understand the return on that particular activity. Like, there's no question that I'm the best at managing my calendar, but is spending an extra 20 minutes over the course of a week being the person to set the appointments in my calendar the best use of that 20 minutes?
Yeah, I mean, let's look at it this way. This one's actually really good. I'm glad you brought that one up, and I'm glad I said it. But let's think of that one like just for a second. Basically, if I am not managing my own calendar and I'm pushing everybody off to an assistant, that assistant better be able to do that job 100 times better than I can. What that means is that they need enough access to be able to know where I am pretty much in like 10, 20-minute intervals, so that I'm not basically making anyone else feel like they can't get in contact with me, or they don't know what's going on if I'm going to be late and things like that. And so very few assistants that I've met and that I've even interacted with can do that kind of job really well. And so to me, it's like stepping in someone else's shoes, which is the person on the other end that I'm meeting with or trying to schedule something with. How do they feel if I go add somebody else and say, hey, go deal with my assistant?
Yeah.
Right. And unless that assistant's literally amazing, I think it's very difficult to, get them to take that task over from me, and I can just do a better job. And honestly, I can do it faster, and I'll save the other person a lot of headache by doing so, and make them feel better, make them feel like I actually care about them, which I do. And so I guess that's kind of the high level way I think about it. I mean, I think it's really important to be the person that manages my own schedule in this case.
You have me rethinking my calendar system right now, but I think it makes total sense. And I think it's important in a lot of instances, that personal touch, that showing that you care about other people that we've alluded to earlier, is what sets you apart, especially when you're a person running multiple companies who has a lot of things going on like yourself.
Yeah. I mean, another angle of that is like, if you email me, it's very likely I'm going to respond. There's like a 50 to 70% chance I'll respond literally within minutes. And that's just hard to do if you have an assistant and someone else getting in the way. And that's something that people don't expect. And it's something that I personally am a little addicted to. I actually pride myself in being able to answer that email fast. A lot of people hate email. A lot of people bitch and moan about it. Me, I think it's our way of life. It's the way we communicate. Send me more email. That would be my answer to a lot of those type of things. Obviously, if it's like a completely cold email, it probably takes me a little bit longer. But in general, people that I already have interacted with, they get email responses really fast, and it makes them feel good. Makes me feel good.
Yeah, I think there's also an element of delight in there that you're, by getting back to somebody really quickly, and that they didn't expect it. I mean, it's a nice thing to do, and it makes people think highly of you, that you're attentive, that you're hardworking, that you're diligent. I heard a story of somebody emailing Mark Cuban and him getting back in like 2 minutes. They say, wow. And they said, wow, I can't believe you got back to me that fast. And he said, old habits die hard, or something along those lines, which I liked.
Yep. I definitely share that same habit.
Awesome, man. Well, this has been super valuable for me, and it's just given me a lot of different things to think about in terms of what types of questions I should ask myself in terms of creating something, my interactions with people. I've learned a lot from this, man, and I really appreciate you sharing this insight with us today. I want to finish with just one question that I always like to ask people that come on the show, and it's, if you could just give one or two pieces of advice for people that are looking to get an edge in accomplishing the things that they want to for their life, what would that be? Yeah,
I have one word. It's 5 letters, and it's called focus. And I think that, some people will tell you, hey, you don't need to focus. You should do a lot of different things. I basically disagree with them. I think the one tip is like, if you can figure out what you should be focused on right now, that's going to help you with whatever your goal is. You're just going to make progress on that. And if you don't, then you're just going to dilly-daddle, and it'll take you longer to make progress on that thing that you should be making progress on. So simple trick, focus, but super hard to do in today's world with all this email, a very powerful computer in your pocket, and no shortage of things you could be doing with your time.
How do you pick which thing you're going to focus on?
I think it's really just important to think about that. Just think about the question of like, well, what should I focus on? Well, what matters to you? For me, learning matters to me the most, and growth. And so I focus on what's going to give me that all the time and give me the most of that. And again, all the concepts we talked about leverage and some of the other things about being able to understand people really fast, all those things help me, cut through the thick and actually focus.
Such valuable advice. Hiten, thank you so much for your time today. If people want to find out more information about you, about Kissmetrics, about Crazy Egg, what are the best places for them to go?
Yeah, I tweet a lot. So following me on Twitter, it's HNSHAH, Hiten Shah on Twitter. It's probably the best place to find me these days.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Glad to be here.
Before we finish up with today's Mindshare, I just want to say thanks for listening to another episode of The Competitive Edge. If you enjoyed the ideas in this episode and want access to all the conversations, tactics, and mind shares we'll be sharing in the future, the best thing you can do is subscribe to The Competitive Edge on iTunes. And while you're there, if you felt like this show has made a positive impact on your day, it'd be great if you could leave us a review on iTunes as well. Now, I know we covered a lot in this episode, and there might be a few key ideas or tools that you want to remember. So we went ahead and compiled all of the notes, links, and even a full searchable transcript of this conversation for you on lifelonglearner.com. That's life-longlearner.com. I also want to give you the details on a cool contest I'm running right now at lifelonglearner.com/fun. By entering the contest, you'll have a chance to win everything from Amazon gift cards to a free month of having your very own dedicated virtual assistant to an opportunity to come and hang out with me and my buds for a few days where we'll teach you how to create your very own passive income stream. To enter this contest and learn more about everything we're giving away, head on over to lifelonglearner.com/fun. Hey guys, I just want to take a minute to thank today's sponsor, Growth Hacker TV. When I want to learn from the best growth hackers on how they're growing their business, whether that's through marketing, advertising, business development, the number one place that I go is growthhacker.tv to see all the interviews they have up there on the inside secrets the top growth hackers are using. Growth Hacker TV has been kind enough to give away a few 6-month memberships where you can get access to all this content directly on their site. To learn more about growthhacker.tv, head on over to growthhacker.tv. And if you're interested in the free memberships that we're giving away to growthhacker.tv, head on over to lifelonglearner.com/fun and you can enter into the giveaway and potentially be the lucky recipient of a complete all access pass to growthhacker.tv for 6 months. Okay, time for another mind share. And I thought that it would be cool to share with you some thoughts that I gave a friend who was trying to improve his emails, specifically like his company emails. So the ones that they send out in their newsletter. And I was telling him about this concept of delight anchors. And I think I came up with the term, but it's definitely a thing that people do and it's not something that I invented. But there's certain people that just put personality in one small element of their emails, and it makes it so much better. It even forces me to take actions in the email that I wouldn't normally take. So like a few examples of this are writing amazing content in the PS section of an email. If someone is constantly like delighting me every single time I go to the PS section, I will always read that email to completion or make sure that I go and see the end of the PS section. Somebody else I know, and I started to steal this a little bit with my emails, is they would put a little nickname they'd give themselves related to the content of the email in between their first and last name. So like, let's say that I just wrote an email about winning big. I would put Scott, quotations, wins big in bold, or loves to win big, or really needs to try to step it up and win big, Britain, in the email, and have a new theme every single email. So I think like when we think about creating content, creating products, like whether it's the introductions for a podcast, whether it's the thing that somebody sees when they sign into your product, like MailChimp, that's really cool. Just think about like injecting delight. How can you inject delight and use that strategically so that every single time somebody opens up an email from you or listens to your podcast or signs into your application, there's just a nuanced element of delight in there that wants them to come back and that will also direct them to take an action that you want. So my advice to him was, what are some delight anchors that we can add into this email that will help people take actions and continue to open these? and continue to be very present in the spots where the perfect call to actions are. So, if you're not currently using any delight anchors in your products, it could be something that you could do to get more out of it. Hope you've enjoyed this one. Talk soon.